a national holiday. For both Casey Thompson and myself, Kevin Kelly, we're here live on the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. It's season 2. And yeah, oh, look at those pictures. Man, those are cool. You got a hell of a studio.
Well, yeah, but my camera does what it wants to do. So,
That's
if
okay.
you see some crazy stuff once in a while, sorry.
That's okay. It's season 2, so we figured why not record on Easter Sunday, and then we realized midweek, oh yeah, Mania is this Sunday too, which I think is that's like a non-Vince thing, Casey. I think Vince's deal was always that he never wanted to be up against Easter, and I seem to remember that. I can't put my finger on it specifically to where I heard that for sure, but I think so. I think it was an Easter Sunday thing. I think that was a Vince thing.
I see you have the Bob Cook Mountain Dew in there tonight.
Diet, baby, diet.
I have the pot cup.
Of course. That's the secret sauce in there, probably.
Yes, sir.
That's what keeps you going. So Casey and I figured we'd chit-chat for a little while and we give some Mania thoughts. And I, of course, was there for 6 of them and just wanted to, kind of run down like some memories and get folks thinking. If you want to take a break from some of the packages in between the great matches, boy, the triple threat women's match tore the house down, Casey, to open night 2 with Io Sky besting both Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley to retain the women's championship. And as Shinsuke Nakamura pointed out on social media, the first Japanese wrestler to win at Mania in 27 years. Wow. So hats off to Io Sky for getting night 2 off with a bang. Casey, do you remember the first WrestleMania you ever saw?
Yeah, WrestleMania 1. I have the program from it. Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't see. I saw it at live circuit at the convention center. I went with my aunt.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How was the viewing experience of closed circuit?
I didn't know any better. It was
yeah.
It was cool. But I will tell you, I did take my son to WrestleMania in Orlando when Ric Flair had his last match against Shawn Michaels. So it was got comp tickets from the company. So my nose is kind of still bleeding from it. You know how gracious and generous they are. Thank you, John Laurinaitis, for the tickets. I'm not going to complain, but
Casey, I got you some good seats. You're going to love them.
The really coolest thing about it is they had to go through the hotel. I had to go to the hotel to pick them up. And if maybe you can explain a little more to people, WWE rents out the whole entire hotel.
Correct.
And they put a ring in there. They stay there for like the week and they just go over their matches over and over and over. Am I correct?
It is it's a full set. It's a full kind of lockdown situation in the hotel. The first year that I was there for WrestleMania was WrestleMania 13, and it got bigger each year, and security got tighter, and the circle got more and more closed. Now it's basically everybody is so popular that they have to keep every single fan away, or nobody will get any sleep. Nobody will get anything done, and it won't be a fun experience. When
we went to the hotel, a little interesting tidbit here is that's when the Big Show was doing the boxing match with Floyd Mayweather.
Right.
And Floyd Mayweather was coming out as we were going in to the lobby with his whole entourage and everything. So it was pretty cool.
We've got, I'm checking out this live stream here.
And then another thing I'll tell you about WrestleMania.
Yeah,
is you've heard Hogan talked about it when he was wrestling in Toronto against The Rock. He had to go down to, he says, Miami. It was actually Davie, Florida, to Rocky Johnson's school to go over the match with The Rock. I was actually in that warehouse when they were doing that.
No way.
Yeah, I was. I've told stories how I used to, quote unquote, babysit Rocky to keep him out of trouble.
Right.
Because, as we say, Rocky is Rocky.
Rocky Johnson, he's talking about, folks. Rocky Johnson.
The father. Yes. And all we ever heard was, Dewey this, Dewey this, Dewey. And so We were actually Pat Patterson was there. I was there. Rocky was there. Orlando Jordan was there. A few of us were in the warehouse during that. So it
Mm-hmm.
was pretty interesting.
Was there disagreements? Was there rib cage hurt? You know, the way Hogan told it, he was basically on death's door and was flown down there.
Yeah, he kind of kayfabed that. I'm sure he had other things going on where he didn't feel anything, but hey, alleged. Um, but I did hear him talk about an interview that he was talking about it being like 100 degrees. It was warm, but I don't think it's quite that warm. Um,
It's March in
and it,
Florida. It's not that hot.
yeah, and then he was, also talked about it was true they do choreograph everything in Hogan's era. They just called it all in the ring.
Right.
And so you could understand how the disconnect about the match would be, because Hogan did make a really great point. What if they are not buying it? And what happened? What everyone knows the history behind that match is they started cheering for Hogan, so they had to flip everything on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty interesting.
There was a lot of talk about that, and we've talked about it here on this show with Pat Patterson being involved, and I saw the day of conversation where they were kind of walking through some things, and it was really just conversate, not really
Yeah.
doing anything. And Pat made the point that, well, we'll see what the fans say, and we'll go in that direction. So,
Right.
and obviously, it became one of the most iconic matches in WWE history and WrestleMania history. It's one of those moments you'll never forget. You saw it where, of course, I saw the first WrestleMania as well. I watched it on the MSG network.
Oh wow.
And yeah, because I was lucky, my cable company in Stewart there had the MSG channel, so we got to see it.
Well, you must have some off-brand cable.
It was Perry Cable back in the day. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
this was in Jensen Beach. It wasn't even like a big
Wow.
cable company, but we were able to get all the pay-per-views and everything through that. I saw 2. I definitely saw 3. I know I went and saw 4 over at my friend's house. And then from there it was kind of a blur. But yeah, you remember, you remember those big WrestleMania moments. And my first WrestleMania was WrestleMania 13. And we had done the
Mm.
Slammies the night before. And I was brand new with the company. I'd been with the company, less than a year. And it was, for me, it was much ado about nothing. WrestleMania 13, it didn't really feel like much else other than a regular Raw. It was just, there was nothing special to it. Now, of course, they did get bigger and bigger each and every year, and there was
Right.
more festivity to it, more pomp and circumstance.
It
But
almost turns into like the NFL Super Bowl, how they have the whole week of
yeah,
events and different things like that. Speaking of, did you happen to see any of the Hall of Fame last night?
clips, only a few clips. I
Okay.
did see Triple H kiss Shawn Michaels on the mouth,
Yeah, I did
which,
watch the whole thing. I
yeah,
thought
what'd
it
you
was
think?
I thought it was pretty good. Um, I think there's a little, I don't want to use maybe the word disrespect. I'm kind of confused on the whole legacy thing, like with Ivan Koloff. So is he not in the Hall of Fame, or is he just like in the wing of the Hall of Fame? I don't
Um,
quite understand that.
Again, not a physical building. It's imaginary. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer. Of course, night one kicked off with a title match for the Royal Rumble winner. Do you think Jey Uso should have main evented tonight? Do you think he got hosed from the Florida wrestling room? What do you think?
Now, I I think he won the title. I think he's happy. He don't care. He's
Yeah,
probably getting a great payday. So
that they always said. Remember Daniel Bryan's match with Sheamus that lasted 18 seconds? That was the
yeah,
most money he had ever made. Certainly the most money he'd ever made per second. And
right. Yep.
everybody was crying for him, but he got his full WrestleMania check, and it's a big one.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
it again, it's a now how would so how would you feel about that, Casey? Would you feel somehow shortchanged? Were you one to complain about a spot, or were you happy for what you got?
Well, that's interesting. Me, no, personally, I never complained. I always like to be the match before intermission, especially when we did like house shows and stuff like that, because
Mm-hmm.
I was, especially if I was a babyface, because I was on everyone's mind. I'd get a lot of sympathy during the match and then sell a shitload of pictures. That was my plan.
Right.
Now, my partner, when I was in a tag team, right there, the Exterminators.
There you are.
Today it's showing all my pictures. Usually it cuts off half my head, but my camera's crazy. But he would always, when we did shows for other people, he'd always complain about getting on early. I remember one time you booked us in Tampa for WWF, and
Yes.
he was complaining and bitching to you about getting out. Oh, come on, we leave early. And I'm like, dude, shut the hell up.
Yeah.
You don't leave early when you're here. You stay
Nope.
the whole time. And, you know, people have said he's held me back. You know, it is what it is. You know, it's all in the past and everything. But I remember being at the, I think it was the Sundome in Tampa where we were. And I remember talking, it's the first time I met Buddy Colt, you know, from Florida
Oh,
Championship Wrestling. And Buddy was the nicest person I met, like from the get-go, and just sat there and just talked and talked. And Cliff was like bugging me to let's go, let's go. I'm like, stop. You can go if you want to go. I'll find the ride home, but I'm not. I was talking to Buddy Colt. Grew up watching him on TV, and But so no, I mean, I didn't really care. It didn't matter to me. You know, as long as you're on the, you don't have to be the main event to have the best match on the night.
right.
I always went out there with the means of stealing the show and having the best match where everyone left, no matter if I was first or last, they were thinking about me. So that's all I cared about.
Now, and okay, so then that gets into the argument. The other side of that coin would be you wrestle for your spot. You wrestle, meaning if you're in the opener, it's a different match than if you're in the main event. So would you throw a bunch of, false finishes in if you were on early? Would you throw some big moves in early in an effort to steal the show? Or would you go out and do your job better than anybody else could have in that spot?
I would do my job better than anyone else. I would wrestle, but I wrestle hard, and I put a lot of psychology in how I call the match to where people will be on the edge of their seat, not knowing what to expect next, and that's how I won them over.
Gotcha. Because again, you go, you want to hear a guy, oh, they stole the show. Well, that wasn't your job. We wanted you to wrestle, the opening match and let the people settle in and give us a good, 6-8 minutes tops and then save some stuff for the main event. I know AEW prides themselves on having a whole night of main events. But when you start, when they did their last pay-per-view and you start with Will Ospreay versus Takeshita, it's impossible to follow. And it makes it very difficult. So there's I have
an AEW question.
Yeah.
For you. Okay, you have insight. You've been there. Personally, myself, I think they have some great talent there. I think it's misdirected because I think you're watching one of their mega long pay-per-views.
Right.
And how long can someone, last watching that? Because like you were saying, you have to keep outdoing each other each match. The structure of how a wrestling show is supposed to be. So don't you think if they structured it a little differently, held people back and built up to the main event and stuff like that, they might actually start drawing better and getting better pay-per-view buys and things like that?
I don't know, Casey. They do pretty well on pay-per-view. I will say that they've always done consistently good numbers on pay-per-view, and they do draw a good house for a pay-per-view. They usually sell out the venue. They've done very well. If they did things differently, would things be different? Well, obviously, yes. And I think if they made a television show that was a little more episodic and got you interested in I like it when they do personality stuff. And I'm never a big fan of the WWE style. There's a scene going on in the back every time there's an interview. It was the long running joke when I was there. Every Alex Marvez interview would get interrupted with a punch. We used to just say, Alex, why don't you just say, hey, I'm Alex Marvez, and then just step away because there's going to be a fight.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. There's a lot of different things they could do.
Wasn't he a Miami newspaper guy?
Yeah, he wrote for
Yeah,
the
when I ran my
Herald.
promotion, when I ran my promotion, I used to talk to him a lot,
Yep,
and he used to help promote it and things like that.
he's a
Yeah,
great
that's
guy.
what I thought it was. But you know, how time goes, you lose contact with people, you forget about them and
Right.
stuff like that. But it's crazy.
Yeah, and he was always God. He was such a nice man. Him and Tony Schiavone both. Everybody was great. There was a whole bunch of great people that worked there. So as your camera does the zoom in and out thing, want to
Yeah.
remind everybody that if you're joining us live, of course, the entire archive of everything that we've done thus far on the In Ring Wrestling podcast is available. We've kicked off season 2 here with going live, and what Casey and I hope to do on this podcast is talk to you and give you some insight as to what really goes on behind the scenes in the wrestling industry. Casey, of course, famous for probably putting over just about every major star in the 1990s and beyond. How many matches have you had? Did you ever keep count, or was it
No, it was hundreds.
in your whole career? You had hundreds of matches?
No, TV matches. I'm talking.
Just TV matches, and
Yeah.
and any estimate on the number of matches you had total in your career?
No, I mean, some days I was wrestling 250, 300 days a year, so it's up there.
It's
You know,
amazing.
uh,
And
you know,
guys now
yeah, they're doing what 60 matches a year.
100, some of the more active
Yeah,
guys are up around 100, but 100 to 150 seems to be the top end.
yeah. See, I was doing a podcast the other day with it was a generational thing. They had me as the old timer, which was kind of funny.
Yeah,
So I was from the late '80s, '90s, and 2000. They had uh, one of the guys from OVW from the '90s to late '90s to 2000, and some brand new kid that's 18, and kind of we all had the kind of the same outlook. But I was talking about how wrestling how you really didn't get to hone in any craft because nowadays they don't wrestle hardly at all.
right.
So I mean, before you wrestled so much that you were able to hone in your craft and just get better at it. They don't have that opportunity like back in the day.
One of the big news items that came out of WrestleMania yesterday was the announcement that WWE and
Oh
AAA from
yeah,
Mexico are getting into business together. And
yeah, I
boy,
saw that.
I've had my spidey senses have been tingling for a few weeks now, Casey, since we saw The Rock wearing a New Japan T-shirt, looking at a Rubik's cube with a light over his head. It was a very symbolic picture that he put up on social media, and it's just had me
Hmm.
thinking, boy, if WWE and New Japan made a deal, now of course they already have a working relationship with Noah, but the idea of helping the talent that WWE has in their developmental system, if
Wow,
they help
game
them
changer.
develop, yeah, but if they help them develop a well-rounded style by spending time in AAA in Mexico and by going, so they learn lucha, they learn what wrestling in Mexico is all about. Then they might go to Japan and
Strong style.
they could wrestle for Noah. They would learn the King's Road style. If they wrestled with New Japan, they would wrestle strong style, and
Yeah,
they would come back a more well-rounded individual.
true.
It's not the worst idea in the world, and it certainly wouldn't. I don't think it's going to hurt anybody's business because
Well, my only
if they're paying for the
right.
talent, if WWE is flying them down and WWE is paying them, then basically they're working there for free, and that benefit it hurts some of the foreigners and their ability to go over there, because why would I pay you if I get WWE guys to come in for
Right.
free and kind of do the same thing?
My only fear is that WWE wants to put their twist on it and it's
Yes,
going to taint it and ruin it. So they're going to change the whole. Actually, if you look at WWE, they look so much like a triple A with all the sponsorships everywhere. I was going to ask you about that. Um, when you were there, uh, Vince took the ring as very sacred, right? Like he
correct.
wanted a very plain mat, which I totally 100% agree with it. That's my feeling. But now that Triple H is taking over and, Khan and all that stuff, it's like a billboard everywhere.
Right.
They had turnbuckles or Circle K on the turnbuckles for WrestleMania, all that. I'm not a big fan of that personally, but you look at AAA, they're the same exact way. Any of those, Latino promotions, it's like a billboard everywhere
Oh, sure.
when you wrestle for them. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't. It doesn't bother me in the least. It isn't something that I notice. I do notice, of course, when I first see them, but then after a while, it's like I don't see them. Of course, New Japan,
Right.
I was there for 8 years, and they had the mat sponsored. They would get a sponsor for every tour, so they got a new canvas for every tour, and it was largely the same sponsors, but occasionally a couple of different ones here. But you don't even see it. You don't even realize it. And the only time is like if Bushi would spray the mist, and there would be black ink all over it. An occasional blood. You didn't see a lot of blood in New Japan. So by the end of the tour, the mat gets a little grimy. But it's to me, it's if the company can make money doing it, then so be it. And it just. I don't know. It just doesn't bother me as a purist.
WWE has 6 or 7 of the exact same sponsored mats because they change them anytime they get any dirt on it. Do they have multiple mats?
They stack them up like a sandwich, and then after as soon as they leave that segment, AEW does the same thing. They pull that mat up off, they roll it up, they throw it under the ring, and there's a clean new mat for the next segment. It's very common in television wrestling. And again, a lot of the athletes, were you a spray tan guy? Because a lot of athletes will wear the spray tan and it gets everywhere.
Yeah. I've talked a lot about how, the hot stuff spray that we used. I mean, you would use any advantage you could use. I've used a spray tan. I've used the self tanners. I've used baby oil with iodine. Everything. I mean, going to the show, you're like rubbing it all over your body and everything, just trying to get a little darker. And then you get there and they're like, man, you look at someone else, you're like, God, he's like twice as dark as me.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw, what's his name, Vito. He was making some contraction. He was mixing everything and put it on, and it was almost like a pro bodybuilder tan after he was done with it. It was I was looking, I was like, wow, that was fairly interesting. But they weren't allowed because Road Dogg, Brian Armstrong was allergic to hot stuff spray.
Correct.
They wouldn't allow anyone to use it. So they're like, oh, hot stuff. And that was hot stuff spray was everything in WCW. Everyone had that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's only a few guys that didn't wear it back in the day.
And of course, if they go to Mexico, there will be a lot of hot stuff around. It's again a cultural thing. It's a body thing. It's self-awareness. It's all these different elements involved. But I think again, at the end of the day, if it's safe and if it's legal and you can do it, then why not? Why not try it? As long as you weren't ingesting that iodine with baby oil, I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
Probably the only thing you guys didn't take back in the day. Here, drink this.
I made sure we got to the next town, so I was pretty safe. I was fine.
There you go.
But some of the guys, you're lucky if they, it's funny you talk about that. Triple H did talk about that when he used to ride with the Clique, and his first day riding with them, how Sean Waltman was like, he was fine, and all of a second later, he ordered like 5 drinks, soda, a lemonade, a water, milkshake, and turn around talking. A second later, he's in it, his head's in it, passed out.
Yep.
And Scott Hall's arguing with the waitress, and he's like, oh, and so. He was like, I was the only one that didn't do anything, so I made sure we got to the next town.
Right.
So I can semi-relate to that. I've many times have got us to the next town because I was the only one that was capable of driving.
Triple H was I never saw him drink anything other than water in all of my years there. And the idea of being safe and being the responsible one is a good thing and can help you, especially if you are on the rise. I'm peeking here at Twitter just to see if there's any news about WrestleMania as we are live during the big event. How about, something I want to get your thoughts on. How about that Bronbreaker spear to Carlito a couple of weeks ago? We saw that, and boy, did that get replayed and over again. Your thoughts on the spear and your thoughts on taking that spear?
Well, I don't think he holds back at all. I've seen one that he came running all the way down the ramp at a full sprint, so
Yep.
His uncle and father were, tight in the ring, which I had no problem with, wrestling snug, stiff, whatever. As long as you're safe, there's no big deal. You just have to really learn exactly when to take your bump to protect yourself, but yeah,
Right.
he's pretty intense. I enjoy it.
I saw that and was just like, oh my goodness. Because that spear was, again, that's one of those things that people, the casual fan who may not wrestle or who may not watch more than WrestleMania or the Royal Rumble or something,
Right.
they're going to be talking about it. And kudos to Carlito for taking that one, because that could not have felt good. When you look at WrestleMania during the Attitude Era, was there a lot of chatter outside the company about Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14 as to whether or not he was going to get in the ring? Do you remember any of that? Because there was certainly a lot of talk within the walls.
Oh, really? No.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Explain.
Well, because he was, he was not feeling well. He was, his back was bad. And this was going to be
not feeling well.
And this was his first. This was going to be his last match before taking time off to get his back better. And this was a guy that had already lost his smile once, and the whole controversy with Bret. And then a few months later, now he's the one who's dropping the belt to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and they had everything set up with Mike Tyson, and of course all of that story that was coming.
Oh, that's
in.
The one Taker was in the back, putting his tape on to make sure the mat. Yeah.
Taping his hands.
Yeah.
That's one of those things that, like, word starts to spread within the industry. I know that there were.
Right.
It was the only time that there was a special dressing room for one wrestler. It was the first time I had seen it there, and that was for Shawn. And Shawn got to the building when Shawn was ready to get to the building, and nobody saw him again until it was time to go to the ring. So everybody was kind of on pins and needles that whole day, wondering if the match was going to get in the ring, and if so, what happened. Vince was never going to let that match not get in the ring, and that was always his biggest thing. I don't care what we got to do. Let's get the match in the ring. But obviously, with Taker sitting there and taping his hands up at Gorilla, just in case somebody didn't want to do business, but everything did go off without a hitch, and of course it became a great memory for Steve Austin and the start of his world title run with WWE, and of course it was the year before where we had the Stone Cold versus Bret Hart match and a double turn. The double turn, do you think it was manufactured? Do you think it was organic? What do you think?
Bret Hart's never going to be heel in Canada. It's not going to happen. It might have been a little forced, I think that's the worst thing they could have done for the business, is try to make, Stone Cold a heel.
Right.
The guy was wrestled and did what he wanted to do, said what he wanted to do, and everyone liked him, even if he was technically a heel or a baby face. He was just so over. So, I think they probably look back on it and say, you know what, that might not have been the best decision to do.
Right.
For business.
Well, it was again one of those iconic moments, and of course, Tom Buchanan was the ringside photographer who got the cover, the blood dripping off of Steve Austin as he's in the sharpshooter with Ken Shamrock as the special guest referee. When you look back at WrestleMania moments, that's certainly one that sticks out. When you have there's some Bret kid here who's chiming in, and obviously we have to, Hello, Izzy.
Well, everything stops when she comes on the scene, you know?
Yeah, of course.
It's my little
But
girl.
I look back. Of course, you gotta love her. I look back at that, and then I think ahead to WrestleMania in the Houston Astrodome with that monstrous crowd. I've never been in a building so big as the Astrodome in Houston. And Steve Austin turning heel and siding with Vince, and then The Rock leaves the next day to go to Hollywood. And you've taken the two biggest babyface stars in the wrestling industry who were simultaneously selling out houses and selling all kinds of merch, and one leaves and the other turns heel.
What was his chatter like backstage when they knew that two of the top baby faces were leaving? Who was the one who was like, I'm going to step up, I'm going to take their spot, I'm going to make that money? You know what I'm saying? Everyone had to be trying to jockey for position to be that next person.
There was a lot of crossed signals at that point because they had just bought WCW. And I think they were hoping to kind of distract a lot of people with some of that newness, and they were going to start running 3 shows with ECW shows, WCW shows, WWF shows. I'm not sure that everybody's mind was where that it needed to be. I think Steve knew that he needed to turn heel. He needed to freshen things up, at least in his mind. And I know that the turn was planned for the year before, but it didn't happen because he was out hurt. So could they have timed it better? Rock, it wasn't in the cards for Rock to leave to go to Hollywood to go make the Scorpion King, and that was going to be his launch into Hollywood. That's one of those things now. We're returning Steve and we're losing Rock. Well, we'll make the best of it. And they tried, but business certainly took a nosedive.
Dip. Yeah.
And then the other big WrestleMania memory, like for me, I had just gotten let go. I got let go in the end part of March in 2003, and then a few weeks later is WrestleMania from Seattle. So I didn't get to see that one live, but Brock Lesnar doing that shooting star press and nearly killing himself against Kurt Angle. My God. Yeah. Oh, that was so scary. I hate looking at highlights of that. It just scares me to death about what could have happened.
Have you heard the stories about them really going at it in a shoot just amateur style?
Oh, yeah.
Or did you see any of that?
Oh, I sure did. Vince cut it off.
Oh. Yeah, because Kurt was so far advanced. I mean, Brock Lesnar was an NCAA, Division I champion, but so was Kurt Angle. But Kurt Angle is also an Olympic champion, freestyle champion. So
yeah, that was
some good stuff.
There was always a lot of, and those types of things. If you have a shoot during the show, before a show, it livens everybody up. Everybody's talking and making bets and they're having fun with it, but that was one that
Leave
Vince
it to the wrestler to bet on anything.
Of course, they were all taking sides. And now the one that I saw quite a bit was Shelton Benjamin, and nobody got the best.
He was good.
Yeah, nobody got the best of Shelton Benjamin. There was a guy in Ring of Honor who was kind of one of the top guys at the time, and everybody thought, he was a lot of talk. Boy, he was talking about it, all this and that. He was gassed up guy, blah, 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 blah. And they started, he started on Shelton, and Shelton was like, okay, if you want to, get in the ring, let's go. And it was just like
quiet, right? Very
and just toying with him, just toying with the guy the whole time. Never really tried very hard.
He was a super athlete.
Yeah, and just, again, next level amateur. So no matter what level of amateur experience you might have had, somebody like Shelton Benjamin, somebody like Kurt Angle is going to be able to twist you in knots, and you're not going to be able to do anything against them because their technique is so next level.
Shelton coached Brock Lesnar at Minnesota.
Right. Came back to be an assistant coach, and his specific job was to work with Brock so that he could win the NCAAs, which he did that next year. And then, of course, they were in OVW together as the Minnesota Stretching Crew. And then Charlie Haas was put with Shelton after Charlie's brother Russ died, and they wound up being a really great tag team, the world's greatest tag team, and they were a great tag team for Ring of Honor as well. Excuse me, but and again, that Charlie and Russ were Seton Hall grads and had wrestled there, so they knew what they were doing inside the ring and could certainly take care of themselves. But when you look at the presence of that amateur quality, that Kurt Angle, even Chris Benoit, and their memorable match. It's you look back WrestleMania 17, what they did, and then of course with Eddie and Chris both winning. I mean, that was just like those were some special moments in that era.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you continue to watch the WWE during that era? I got to where I couldn't really watch it.
I watched bits and pieces of it. Probably about as much as I watch now. I actually sat down and tried to watch a little bit, knowing that we were going to talk a little bit about, WrestleMania. So I turned it on and was watching, and so I do watch it more than I used to, but sometimes it pains me to do so.
And why does it? What's painful about it? Is it the style today that kind of leaves you wanting more? Is it what is it? What is it that you're not so keen on?
I think sometimes it's the whole presentation. They're doing entrances that take 10 minutes long. I'm more of the old school. I want to see, you know, more wrestling, less talking and stuff like that. The
Mm-hmm.
wrestling, I did watch Jey Uso and Gunther, and I will tell
Yep.
you one thing: Vince wouldn't let that be. They were out of shape. They both were fat. They had bellies.
Well, Gunther's always been. Gunther's always had that, that layer of protection on him.
Yeah, but Jey Uso is small. He's little, and I mean he had abs, but when he was blowed up, he had looked like a beer belly sticking out. And I was sitting there watching and doing like, wow, this is for the world title at WrestleMania, and they're not both. Do you think The Rock would be in that kind of shape?
No.
I mean, that's how I look at things a little different than a lot of people do, and that's one of the things I look at is, the shape they're in and stuff like that. So it's I I was I wasn't impressed with, I think they could have been in better shape personally.
Yeah, and I know one thing that nobody's ever going to be able to touch WWE on is the presentation. Is all the video packages, that entrance for Roman Reigns last night it just gave you goosebumps watching it, all of the images of the Samoans that had preceded him and all of that. It seems to me like they're doing a very good job. WWE is of honoring the veterans of the past much more so than they have done in the past. Is that and I think that's a conscious decision? Is it, is that Triple H saying we're going to do it this way? Vince may have been a little hesitant to have so much callback to the past. What do you think?
Yes, and I wanted to talk on this because the Hall of Fame, if anyone goes back and watch the Hall of Fame, you can tell it's coming from the top that they're going to do this because all the talent and even the people in the crowd, Dory Funk stand up and they're like, is silent. They're talking about Ivan Koloff, barely Kamala, barely any reaction at all. So you can tell there was a big disconnect for many years of not, displaying those great talents that paved the way. And they're trying to change it and everything
Right.
now. I guess it's going to take time and all that. But I was watching it doing like, wow, they're not even, not even making any. Even the talent was kind of like, whatever. I mean, it was a long night. I mean, you looked at Booker T. He was like this. And they're like, oh, I saw somewhere talking about them being emotional and stuff. I said, he was asleep. he wasn't emotional. He was just sleeping.
He was taking an emotional nap, Casey. It was an emotional nap for him. He was very moved by the entire
exactly
by the entire night.
I actually watched the whole thing. I enjoyed it though.
Yeah.
Overall.
And I think again, one of the things that we've talked about here on this show is and one of the reasons why that this podcast exists is to talk about the guys that don't normally get talked about, the unsung heroes who made those matches so great, and the star-making moments for the guys who were there in with the top stars of the day. And, to very little fanfare, no music and entrance, just being in ring. And that's where this podcast got its title. But having those and seeing those matches and those moments and the retrospective look backs, you can be proud of your part in it because so many of the guys that are going to be in the Hall of Fame over the next 20 years, you were in there for and have been in there with. So you could say, hey, I was there for a part of it. It's pretty cool to me.
I looked out at the crowd and you could see, I wrestled Austin. You had Mick Foley. I was around him. Booker T. He's in there. I mean, majority of them. So it was. It's. I have no regrets. A lot of. I'm not. Bitter, angry. You know, it is what it is. I'm happy with it. A lot of people don't have the opportunities that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So, I take it and I talk about it all the time now, and this podcast and a lot of others.
So we're live. We're live as WrestleMania is ongoing, and of course, the main event tonight is John Cena versus Cody Rhodes, and we'll leave with this. We'll end with this thought: the idea of John Cena and his turn. Do you think that this will be a one and done for him, meaning he's going to turn back at the end of the night? Cody wins and John Cena realizing the error of his ways, or is tonight going to be the next chapter in an episodic story that involves John Cena on his final run? Does John Cena walk away with the title tonight? A lot of people seem to think so.
I don't think he's going to turn back because I think he has a whole year to go, right?
Right.
I think he'll turn back babyface at near the end of that run, is what I personally think. But
yeah.
I think it's going to be something, special. Hopefully he has a little color on him now because it's WrestleMania.
Yeah, right.
It was white last time I saw him.
Whew. Man, white as a sheet.
Yeah.
And again,
I guess when you're that over, it doesn't matter, right?
That's true. You'd like to think that it's something. There are some rules that anybody can break, and when you're that over, it doesn't really matter. I'm anticipating a marvelous main event and a cap or two big, huge nights for the entire industry, and then of course Raw the following night. The Raw after WrestleMania is always fun. Like I always make sure I watch that one. Because, there's fans from all over the world who are there and they're seeing Raw for their one time a year and they're singing and chanting and having a great time. And it's usually a wild, crazy train wreck of a show with a lot of swerves and curves. So that's always a lot of fun. But it's definite good conversation for us, I think. The healthier that the industry is, the bigger that WWE is, the better it is for all of us. And we'll see what happens. Maybe one day, Casey, we'll get that enhancement wing of the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? And we can have you and Rusty Brooks and Bob Cook. And let me think of some other names. So give me some other names of some famous
Barry
Horowitz,
Mike Jackson,
George South, and Mike Jackson, Pat Rose. When you look at some of the, and of course, Johnny Rodz is in there and SD Jones, and they were famous for doing the honors for quite a number of guys throughout the years. I think that again, the more credit that is given to you and your generation of athlete, the better it is for all of us. Because hey, there was somebody in the ring with them. There was somebody wrestling these guys that helped them become so popular. I think that I think again that the brethren that you share with the other enhancement guys deserves more respect.
Yeah, and I think it's time to start highlighting, and celebrating the third man in the ring, the referee.
Hey, how about
Because
that?
you can't have a great match without having a great referee, because a referee can ruin your match completely if he, it's the shits.
If he's the shits, you're right. And we can talk about that. In fact, we could talk. Let's do that next week. We'll talk about referees, what makes a good ref, what makes a bad ref, why you see some referees in some matches, why you used to see. And this is something I'll leave everybody with. Why was it that you would see, especially in shows in New York and Chicago, you would see somebody referee maybe the first match of the night, and then he wouldn't come back and referee anymore? Would they get fired? Would they be told, or were they there for a reason? We'll talk about that in an upcoming episode. I like this live format, though, Casey. I like it a whole lot. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I do too.
All right,
and I'm going to work on a special guest for us, and I will say this: that he was a very well-known referee.
Ooh,
I'm going to work on that.
I love it. I love it. I can think of a few names right off the top of my head that would be there. I know when I saw Earl Hebner last summer, we were talking about some things and having fond remembrances. Earl would be a fun guest to have on at some point, but we'll see what happens. And again, we thank you for your support. Check out, and of course, like, share, subscribe. It helps the algorithm. It helps all of this in the crazy world of YouTube. The more that you see, the more that you just click the like button, you share it, you subscribe to whatever we're doing here in the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast, man. It'll just help get you more content here from us. So, Casey, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of WrestleMania.
Yes, you as well.
Thank you, buddy. All right, folks, that's going to do it. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode of the In-Ring Wrestling Podcast. For Casey Thompson, I'm Kevin Kelly, and we'll see you next time. And